Hey guys, so this is a video that's going to be looking at the malignant tumor of skeletal muscles, which is your rhabdomyosarcomas. There's two main types, which are your alveolar and your embryonal, or you might hear embryonal, but embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma, which is by far the most common. And this is just a video showing my weird way of how to remember their translocations because, again, I'm studying for pathology boards and I hate remembering things and there's so many numbers and in my head it just gets all jumbled up. So here's my weird way to kind of remembering it. To start off, just a little bit briefly about rhabdomyosarcs. It's a malignant striated skeletal muscle tumor. It is the most recurrent soft tissue sarcoma in children and adolescents. About 5 years of age is when they typically present. Embryonal is, like I mentioned before, the most common. It has an excellent prognosis, tends to be in the head and neck or GU area. If you hear the term botryoid, it kind of refers to grape-like cluster. So here's, botryoid, looks like grapes, and they'll commonly say there's a grape-like mass that's protruding from the, or in the vagina or something. Just think of this if they say that. You'll also hear about the cambium layer, which is just like a condensation or a kind of compacting of the surface, or what right beneath the epithelial surface. So if you look at the surface of the tissue and you look right beneath that, you can see that it's just a bit more compact, and that's referred to as the cambium layer, and that's with embryonal rhabdomyosarc. With this, you do also see rhabdomyoblast, which can be described as tadpole cells or strap-like cells, and because it is skeletal muscle, you'll see the striations here. A small subset of these embryonal rhabdomyosarcs do stain with MyoD1, and it shows a nuclear positivity. But it's important to note that if you see strong and diffuse positivity with either MyoD1 or myogenin, it's probably not embryonal. You'd favor alveolar in that case. So alveolar on the other end of this spectrum, this is the one that has the worst prognosis. It tends to be a little bit older with adolescents, up to about like 25 years old. So it's not like your embryonal, which is about a 5-year-old coming in. These tend to also be in the extremities, whereas embryonal was in the head and neck or GU area, genitourinary area. And with it being more aggressive, there's increased risk of metastasis. And this is the tumor that if there's strong diffuse myogenin or MyoD1 staining, then it's probably alveolar. So I'm going to start with how I remember alveolar because it's a little bit more simpler. Now, alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, there's a couple different things to note about it, is that it's associated with a translocation, and it can be with either chromosome 2 or 1, and both of these would be combined with your chromosome 13. And because there's these two different translocations, it's associated with the PAX gene, so it's either PAX3 or PAX7. So the most common one I put up here on top. So the most common is this 2 and your PAX3. Now, the way that I remember the PAX3, 7 thing that goes here, and your 13 being your FOXO1 gene, is that I kind of just like to rearrange or rethink of this as like A, L, V, E, O, L, A, R. It looks like a 2-year-old, but my handwriting already looks like that, so I'm sure it's just right up there with y'all. So that's how I remember PAX and FOXO1, is just because that's what it looks like. So in an answer choice, I can pick that because it just jogs my memory. Now, how to remember all these other numbers. So there's, the 2 or the 1, the 3 or the 7, 13. So what I kind of start with is just looking at, alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma. So that's 2 words. So that's how I get my 2, is that it is 2 words. Now, the way I remember the 13 is, so this is if I, 2 words, sorry, gonna take a step back. 2 words is your alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma. But if you commonly refer to it as like alveolar rhabdo, or instead of saying rhabdomyosarcoma every time. So the way that I like to review or to write it in order to remember this, alveolar, and then I kind of use this R right here, and then it's rhabdo. And then if I'm counting that, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's how I get, it's 13 letters. And yes, we are double counting this R. And the way I do the 1 is that now I can kind of group this as, one thing. So 1 thing instead of 2 up here. I don't know. It's my brain. That's how it works. The next thing, so we have the 7 down here. Now, what I do for 7 is basically just sound out rhabdomyosarcoma. So if I went through, we have rab, do, my, o, sar, co, ma. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there are 7 syllables. And that's how I remember the PAX 7. Let's see if there's anything else. Nope. Oh, the 3, how I remember the 3 is, again, I go back up here, and now instead of doing it by syllables, I do it by words. It's like rhabdo, myo, sarcoma. So there's 3 different kind of clusters. Myo meaning muscle, rhabdo going with skeletal muscle, and then sarcoma being the malignant aspect of it. So that is how I remember the 3. So PAX 3 or PAX 7 with FOXO1, have your alveolar spelled like a little kid, or drew it down here. Translocation with either 2 or 1 with your chromosome 13, because that's how many letters are over here. And as I mentioned, alveolar rhabdomyosarc, if this translocation is present, it has an unfavorable prognosis. Okay, now to go over embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma. This is another, my brain is just more mathematically inclined, like it can remember random, equations and how they relate to each other. So these are the numbers that we have to remember. We have 11p deletion of it, or it could be associated with this loss of heterozygosity. Either way, there's, one of the 11s, the small portion of it is the one that's being lost. And then we have a plus 2q and a plus 20. So these are some of the more common ones. There are a lot more than this. These are the ones that are like tested on. So starting off, I just like to think of, going back to how many words there are. There are 2 words here, so that gives me my 2q. And then I go through and I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's say, I have my 2 down here, and then now I add 9 letters of embryonal, and that will get me my 11. So that's how I see 11. Then now, if I do 9 plus 11 equals 20. So this is how I get my 20. Just go up here is the 11. And the 2Q is just because there's 2 words. So now another way to think of this was that, remember up here, your alveolar had translocation with 2 being the most common with your 13. So here, if we remember that alveolar is translocation with 2 and 13, what happens is that in order, 13 minus 2, or whatever, you get 11 is how the difference between these two. So if you go 13 minus 11, you get 2. And again, with the 2, it kind of goes up here as well. And this is the minus 11 part of it, is how I like to remember that it's the deletion of your 11. And then it's, an addition. So in order to get to 13, it's 11 plus 2. So that's how I remember it's an 11p. Do I have any other little tricks with that? Oh, the loss of heterozygosity. The way that I can remember that, if I, deletion, if you put, let's get another color. So you have our 20, and then we have our 11. So here this is like loss of heterozygosity. Heterozygosity. Oops. Okay. So looks like that's going to be the end of our lecture. Let me know if it helps, or if any of this sticks, or if my brain's just the only one that kind of functions this way. Yeah, hope you enjoy.